It's all live now.
Okay, we're all set. Okay, all right, good morning. This is Wednesday, February 5th. And we are joined today by some folks from the Agency of Transportation, and so glad to have you all in here this morning. And as you know, this is Center Natural Resources and Energy, by the way, for the record. And so I'm sure, as you know, we're talking about this salt bill. And then hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it. We'd love to know your thoughts on it or anything related to do with this issue. So we should probably do a little bit of introductions of ourselves first, and then we'll let you take it away. Does that sound good?
It does.
Okay, great. Normally Senator Hardy would be right there from the Addison district.
Senator Terry Williams, well,
And Watson from the Washington district.
Seth Longworth from Bennington, Senator District.
And Senator Beck would normally be right there from Caledonia. And Jude.
Bernie Hatton, Director of Maintenance.
Awesome. Well, do you want to introduce everybody first?
Sure. Craig DiGiamarino, with Maintenance, Conservation and Stewardship.
Great. Super.
Joel Perigo with Municipal Assistance.
Jen Callahan, also with maintenance and inclusion and compliance section.
Okay, great. Thank you all for being here.
So good morning. So like I said, Ernie Hatton, Director of Maintenance. Tell you a little bit about myself. I started for the Agency of Transportation 28 years ago in the Middlesex garage as a mechanic. And then I switched from being a mechanic onto the road crew. And then I went from being on the road crew in the Morrisville garage to a senior worker at the Morrisville garage, then the supervisor, the Morrisville garage, and then into management in the Northwest region, and now it's the director of the state. And I hold it near and dear to my heart, this agency, because sometimes when you've been somewhere so long, it's who you identify as. When people see me down the street, it's the guy, meaning the orange trucks. And I make it a mission every day to remember where I came from and remember the changes that I've seen in that time. And so I came here today to talk a little bit about why we have become so efficient at spreading salt. And one of the first things I'd like to talk about is when I first started here, we would spread, 130, 140,000 tons of salt throughout the state throughout the year. And we would also spread about 100,000 tons of sand with it. And in current days, our average is about 106, 110 of salt with extremely little sand.
So say that again.
Yeah.
Versus where you were, 130, 140.
Yeah.
Thousand.
Yes, and we're down to like 110, 114 could be an average. I have to grab a calculator to get it perfect, but that's really close. And then it's hard to have an average, right? Because some other real numbers is some years we respond to 40 snow events. These are real numbers. And then there's been years that we've responded to 200 snow events. So it is hard to have that average when you look at a yearly salt usage because it is wildly different depending on when Mother Nature calls, we need to answer the phone. So some of the things that is to be proud of is we stopped spreading 100,000 tons of sand. And that it was really, back then it was an initiative to stop moving our walkways with so much sand. And then over those years, I've seen some major efficiencies come along where we use, we try to have a balance when we use salt between fiscally and environmentally responsible when you spread that salt. So when I first started, the salt there would either be on or off. And that was it. There was an on button and there was an off button. And there was accountability. However, in the modern day, the trucks are computerized beyond what you can even imagine. We know how fast the truck is going. We know whether the plow is up and down. We know how much they are putting down on the roadway at any given time. This is all telemetry, it's instant. We know how much liquid salt they're spraying on that salt. So in just less than 3 decades. The technology is amazing and it's all automatic. As the truck goes faster, the computer compensates and continues that application rate at what it was set at. So if you were putting down a common charge of salt when the weather is, say, in the 20s, it would be 250 pounds per lane mile. So that would be like a wheelbarrow load over a whole mile. And if the truck goes faster, it compensates for that instead of pulling up to a stop sign and it's still just tweaking out. Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the major improvements that we've done. The other thing is everything revolves around our snow and ice control plan. And it's roadway specific, which is really good. It's good for us, it's good for the public, and on the very last page, unfortunately, is a color coded map. There's 4 colors on that map. And it tells you what to expect on that roadway. And we use this policy a lot. Some folks will call and say, you're not using anywhere near enough salt on my road, and some folks will call and say, we want you to use more salt. And we instantly refer to the, this is our plan, this is what we're going to follow. And we strive to follow this plan to the T. It's not saying we miss it once in a while. That's what we strive for. So if you're on a yellow road, which is one of the lowest priority roads we have, you can expect to see snow on that roadway after the storm for up to a day, maybe 2 days, maybe longer if it's really cold.
Yeah.
And then our level of service on the interstate is when it stops snowing, it says as soon as practical, we need to get that road cleaned up. What it doesn't say is thou shalt have a bare road every minute of every snowstorm. And both financially and environmentally, that would be very onerous. I'm not sure we could even manage to do it with what we currently have. We preach safe roads at safe speeds. Sign says they can do 65 miles an hour, but if it's snowing out, we're expecting you to slow down, and that's in our policy as well. I can jump into maybe some quick information of some of the things I've seen, and then we'd be happy for some questions. Just the plow alone in front of the truck, everybody would think it was just, it's just fine. Back in the day, the plow, the blades are about 11 feet long. And they were just one solid piece of metal all the way across. And so what that would do is if the road had any, say, W profile to it, that 11 feet bridges all those gaps. So now you're trying to melt, say the profile was 2 inches deep. Right now you're trying to melt 2 inches of snow, not a 1/4 inch. So just in plow blades alone, now we use, there's not a truck out there running straight blades. We use sectional blades. The plows are set up to sectionally trip as well. And so we're breaking that up 3 to 4 times for segmented plowing. The plow looks the same, but it's quite a bit different. Some of the technology we've jumped to besides just the plow blades is, I don't know if anybody's seen any of our trucks, but they have an after plow or an underbody plow, and it looks like a York rake, if you will. It's a bunch of springy fingers.
Yeah.
And so you're catching that first plow, and then you're catching another plow, which those springs want to fit the profile of the road and scrape another windrow. And so that's another thing that we're really proud of. And then we have used a lot of different, over the years, the way we apply salt, whether it be trying to spin it out in a full width or trying to keep it in a windrow, if you will. We've spread dry salt, we spread wet salt. We have treated salt with 4 or 5 different products over the years. And some of the things that we have found to be the most effective is what we call liquid salt. It's water mixed with salt. It's a 23.3% solution. Nothing else is in it. That is it. And by spraying that solution directly onto the spinner just before the salt hits the road, it makes the salt wet. And that does 2 things. It makes it work faster. Salt needs moisture to work. And then it makes it wet. And so envision a whole truckload of marbles going 35 miles an hour, and when it hits the interstate, it's gone, it rolls, and so the industry standard says just by making that salt wet, saves us 30%, one job, right there. So unless the truck is broken, we do not spread dry salt. We spread wet salt, no matter what, because the bounce and scatter factor is so huge. We used, when it gets really, really cold, salt will actually, you can put it on a pile of snow and it's amazing, it'll just sit there, doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Can't find moisture. And so you need to put a little something on it. We've tried some chemicals over the years, some were a success, some had public outcry, some just didn't work. So we try to use those products now. Very limited, it has to be very, very, very cold, like 10 below zero. And greater before we use those products. They do have a corrosion inhibitor in them that helps, but they're expensive and we try not to use them. Driver training, you know, back in the day when I started, it was, you know, penny drive and here's the truck. We don't do that anymore. So an experienced driver will run with an operator and get them to feel the lay of the road and understand that if there's an elevated corner that the truck needs to ride up high, so that salt will work its way down. Some of the other things that we've developed over the years is, say, a secondary road like Route 100, a two-way road. They go through in the morning and they make those inside-outside passes. They lay down that salt and then it starts to get mealy and moist and slushy in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, instead of plowing at a high rate of speed like we normally would to send it, you slow down a little bit and you smear that material out to the edge. And then that same material that you have in the middle, it works again on the edge. So it doesn't effectively give you double, but you are utilizing.
Get some for it.
You're getting, because effectively you have a full charge of brine there in the middle with that sticky sloppy material that's spraying out front of your tires. You move that over one time and let it work on the edge, and that prevents one round of salting. So the game has changed dramatically in the last, say, 30 years, and technology is evolving always, and we don't give up. There's always that way. How can we do it? And then you get driver buy-in. So if you know, back in the day, if the supervisor said put down 300 pounds per mile, you turn on the truck, they're not really big. But now we try to get driver buy-in where if they can see a 3 mile straight and the wind is blowing that road clean, shut that salter off. Just let it go. Let the wind blow it across the road, because if we make it wet,
Yeah.
it's gonna stick, and now you're just gonna salt it all day long again. So driver buy-in is extremely important. So those are some of the, besides getting into the plan, which I don't think you folks want me to read it paragraph by paragraph, but I would love to take questions.
Okay, so I saw Senator Williams first and then Senator Hardy and then Senator Beck. Go ahead.
Excuse me.
So you guys use a pre-treatment brine, salt water solution,
We did.
do you still do that?
We don't do it anymore, and the reason is, I mean, we could and we have the tools to do it. We found that the timing had to be absolutely 100% impeccable. And if you missed it just by a half hour, you just wasted a truck, a person, and a whole load of material.
You guys had to mix, you had to pre-mix that, right?
We make it.
Okay,
We do make it ourselves. It's very small cost to make it. It's basically municipal water. And I think it's around 2 tons of salt for 6,000 gallons of water. And we do make all our own.
I know a lot of municipalities started trying that too, they're gonna be able.
It is very expensive to set up, but once you set up, the machinery will last a long time.
Right,
And there is some towns that are fully embracing this. The town of Hyde Park is fully embraced in the benefits of spraying their salt, and they're selling to other municipalities at a really good rate. So we would never go back this point to spreading dry salt. That's how convinced we are. Yeah.
Thanks, thanks, Ernie. I feel like I've talked to you on the phone before about something and I've been trying to remember what it was. But whatever it was, you were very responsive. And thanks for your testimony today. I have a couple of questions. I think I know the answer to the first one is that you mentioned the sort of technology and calibration on the trucks.
Yes,
Does it also calibrate for like temperature and type of storm or precipitation? Yeah, I would assume that some snow, if it's really dry versus really wet or versus ice.
so the computer doesn't do that. There's a few things. Every single truck has a pavement temperature thermometer in it.
Okay,
And we, only the supervisors have those back in the day. And the pavement traditionally on a day like today runs about 2 degrees cooler than the outside temperature. Where it can really be dramatic is if you have like a like 10 below 0, 10 below 0, 10 below 0, and that pavement gets super cold and then it warms up and rains. The pavement is 10 below 0, but the air temperature is 30 degrees. And so the truck, just that one feature in the truck, that driver knows that that pavement is
okay,
really cold.
so he can adjust based on the temperature.
Yes, and that's where we need that buy-in, because if somebody's sitting in a chair somewhere saying you should do X. That's not what it's like 20 miles from that.
Yeah, you train your drivers to use their best judgment.
That is
based on
correct.
their training.
And if that pavement drops, I can use like Route 12 in Worcester Woods is a road that I used to plow, and at the beginning of the road that into the middle in the ledges in the woods, the pavement temperature could vary by 15 degrees. You need more salt when the pavement's 15 degrees colder.
And does your salt practices change when you're in a more populated area? And I ask because I'll just give you an example that you know the road. I live right off 125 in East Middlebury. And so does the salt practice change when you go through the little village of East Middlebury versus when you're up, you know, in the non-populated area?
So that's a great question. So the other thing that requires salt to work and work really good is traffic.
Uh-huh.
You need to move it around to keep it moving, because that's, I kind of missed the point there. When you just put salt out in a snowstorm, the snow will snow over your pile and the salt will just sit there.
Yeah,
And once it covers over, the salt is doing nothing. And so the traffic moving around, so. Again, driver buy-in, computer, road temperatures. So when you're out on 125 where cars are able to go, let's just say 30.
mhm.
You could probably use half as much salt as where cars are pulling up to a stop sign. So the driver has to, as he's coming. Or she is coming to a stop sign, they need to increase that poundage just a little bit.
Okay. And then when state roads intersect, like in Middlebury, municipal roads.
Yeah.
What is your relationship and how do you work with municipalities in terms of? What? Do you train municipalities or do any work with municipalities about how they are working on roads that are near state highways?
So we are in contact with them, but coordination about what they're doing, say in their village, is that what you're saying? So like 125 comes in and then I think there's a little part in the middle that the town takes care of.
Yeah,
So they kind of do their own thing on that. We give them a stipend to take care of that half a mile or a mile, and then they do as what they see fit that works for their community.
okay. And do you do any training of municipal so that they know what you guys know?
So I do not, but our local roads program for the VTTC does, but I don't know their curriculum.
Uh-huh,
And we could probably hook you up with those folks if you'd like to see those.
because what we've heard. And maybe what I've heard is you all, the state folks. Are doing what we want through the program we're looking at, the municipal folks to do, is to learn how to use less salt, basically, and that you are all doing it already. Is there? an opportunity for them to learn from you, or if we provided an opportunity for them to learn from you.
Well, like I mentioned, I'm working very closely with the group that trains the towns through the Vermont Local Roads program. And I can't answer for them. I know that they're involved, but to what degree,
Okay,
I'm not super in tune with the training they offer
got it, okay,
for municipalities.
okay,
But they do offer a training.
You offer training in municipality world, I just don't know to what.
okay,
Okay.
yeah. Well, the final thing I just wanted to say is thank you for the Meeting the Plow program with the kids. Kids get so excited about that, and I hear about it from kids in my community and from teachers, and I don't know who came up with that idea, I never would have thought of it, but it's a really nice thing.
It is
So
an
thank you
incredible
for doing it.
program and it warms all of our hearts when we see those pictures of 20 and 30 children lined up in the wing with the plow.
And the names they come up with are just spot on.
And it is amazing the creativity that they come up with.
And the goofiness.
So, and then, like I said, bringing that truck, we bring every truck that's named, we bring it to that school.
Yeah,
We have the plow. And it's just so rewarding.
yeah, it's very cool. Thanks for doing it.
Yes, go ahead.
Thanks, sorry, I missed the first part of your presentation.
No problem.
Sounds like a real Star Wars operation though. Are you, is the state able to quantify, the use of salt over time? The amount that's actually getting onto the, like, are we buying the salt now or?
So we keep very close tabs on
Yeah.
it because that is our biggest sole expense
Right,
for material that's
yeah,
salt.
yeah.
For the maintenance world. And we do. And when you plot it on a map,
Yeah,
it is wildly different because of, like I was mentioning, some years we respond for 40 snow events and some years it 200.
okay.
And so
Yeah,
it's hard to quantify. In 22, 23, 24, we know what we use for salt.
yeah,
And then we know about how many times the trucks went out. But there has been many attempts by Weather Service to do what they call a winter severity index. And again, trying to use cutting edge technology to see how great ourselves, see how we're doing.
yeah.
It isn't quite there yet.
Okay, but I think what you did say in the beginning, if I have it right, that we've gone from an average of 130, 140,000 tons to closer to 100.
Yes.
So that's part of it.
Probably 110.
Okay.
And we also, I was mentioning when I started in 1997, we spread 100,000 tons. 100,000 yards of sand a year. And now we try anything possible, not to spread any sand.
Okay,
There has to be extenuating circumstances. The sand isn't full off, but it, instead of the norm, is now the exception.
like, I'm saying as its own negative. That's good.
That's great, and that's why we stopped.
Can you just say those numbers again in terms of like how much salt you were using and how much salt you're using now?
Yeah, so some of the early years in the 90s, we were in the 130s,
That's tons or yards,
tons.
okay, yeah.
And I think our 5-year average right now, I don't have it in front of me, but I know I'm really close. It's like 110, 114.
Okay, oh, thank you.
And
But we took out 100,000 ton of sand.
Right.
That's the part that's very important here, because at first it's like, well, that's not a percentage, but we dropped that sand
Right,
and the real negative, besides the environmental concerns, but for V-Trans, if you were the first 1 through 5 car behind the sand truck on the interstate, it was good. Traction was good, but if you were the 6th through 100th car, it's like we hadn't even been there, so you would spread a load of sand and just go get another load of sand, and you would just do that round and round and round and round and round. And that's one of the reasons we stopped.
yes, go ahead.
so I think I know that you don't do this, but the testimony we had yesterday, I think indicated that all of the salt put down, something like 3/4 of it is put down privately. What's and parking lots, etc. And I'm just wondering about training for those operators? Is there anything? And anything helping them get to something close to the way you operate?
I would have to refer to our training center because
I know you did.
I want to say,
I'm happy to.
if you're willing,
I'm happy to express what I know. From
Yes.
local. And Craig DiGiammarino, the Training Maintenance Division, Pollution Prevention, Compliance, Conservation Solution. Our remote local roads program is specifically legislatively required to assist municipalities. They have a fixed budget. They do not reach out to commercial entities. They would need to expand their program greatly in order to provide those services. And we need to be a legislative change as far as I understand. Is there any mentions over there? It'd be nice to get them in here directly from them if we're interested in pursuing that discussion.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have, someone from South Burlington coming in right after you. So. I have some questions, about AOT in general, but I kind of want to let you all do your, like, because I know you both have something that you want to add, is that right? You have your own presentation?
Jen is here to answer questions about
Okay.
our TDL compliance program.
Okay.
And I know you heard from Tim Clear yesterday about the TDL program
Yes.
for chlorides, and if you want, I think Jen could jump in for a few minutes and just express how this SIP plan addresses our compliance.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Sure, I can.
Yeah, so Jen Conley again, maintenance, pollution prevention and compliance. So I guess I'm kind of the overseer of our TS4 permit. Not sure how familiar you are with that. Similar to the MS4, which a lot of, Rutland, Chittenden County communities do comply with.
Yeah, after confess, I don't know what either of us mean.
It's a stormwater permitting,
Oh,
essentially.
okay.
There's a lot of components to
Okay.
it. One of the components is kind of responding to impaired waters and the requirements for what we do in impaired waters. So specifically for this is chloride impaired waters. For essentially what we do, is we're required to come up with a plan and tell the agency of natural resources how we're going to handle what we're gonna do in those impaired waters for the pollution. So for chloride, we follow our snow and ice control plan and we report annually our usage in the specific chloride impaired watersheds. So you can go into our TS4 and we have to report on our permit annually. And you can see in there we list out specifically for those watersheds, we were able to set up a system because of our ABL systems that we have in our trucks. To find out exactly how much salt and materials we're using in those watersheds. So that's how we comply with that. And at this point, that's where we are with that. There is one TMDL and I'm sure Tim spoke all about that yesterday, so I don't want to he this program. I don't want to get to that too much, but there is one TMDL as of now. Okay.
That's Sunnybrook.
It's not, I have sunny side.
Sunny side.
Sunny side.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in this, I don't know who in the room, but I think it could be you. Stiles Pond, which is, it's in Waterford, it's a reservoir, it's drinking water for St. Johnsbury. I noticed it popped up on your map the other day as a threatened, body of water. And my question is, there, like, literally the road is like, people lean on the guardrail and fish. Literally, that's how close it is. Like, there is no room there. How does that, when you're trying to take care of that water, but how does that factor into what's happening for it?
Well,
Proximity.
yeah, and I'm not familiar with that specific water body, and it's not listed as impaired regulatory wise.
Yeah,
There isn't any requirement on us. But what I will say is our snow and ice control plan, the BMPs were developed with, there's a whole section that talks about the regulatory area and we developed those BMPs with the idea of the chloride impaired waters and needing to reduce our usage. And there's other obviously financial reasons to do it too, but really specific, we knew we needed to respond to these fluoride impairments. And then what we do is, to the best of our ability, we do that statewide, so that it can be preventative for other streams.
I'm gonna follow up on that, because it's, I wanna make sure that I'm clear about that. So the best management practices that you have in a fluoride impaired watershed area, you're gonna, it's not different best management practices for the whole state. I mean, you're doing that as well, as closely as you can everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah,
Okay.
to minimize, I mean, like I said, there's financial and reasons to do that.
Yeah.
There's really incentive to do that.
That's great.
And the only thing that is different is we do report annually our statewide usage. But for the fluoride impaired waters, we have usage.
For just that.
Just those water sets, those can be. People,
Who do you report to?
Agency of Natural Resources.
Yes,
I don't know who this question is, so. If you use less salt in an area, let's say 10%, 20%, 30% less. Is the impact on safety lineal? Or is there a point at which if you, like, if you only put down 70% of the salt you put down now, it actually doesn't do any good? Or is it just lineal?
I'm gonna let Ernie respond to see.
Ernie Patton, Director of Maintenance. So for studies that I'm aware of, not able to accurately answer that question. One of the reasons we strive to use as little salt as possible, like we said, both financially and environmentally responsible. It would be really hard to take say a piece of road that has a speed limit of say 30 and it's maintained one way, and then not maintained for 2,000 feet a different way, and then maintained back to the level that it was. But as far as the level of 10% would it equal 10% safety, I don't know.
yes, we.
So for you, as boots on the ground has to make everything work. Sounds like we're gonna be, you're doing everything you can to cut down on the salt use. And you don't use sand unless you absolutely have to.
That's correct.
So if more limits are put on the amount of salt you can use, basically you guys are just gonna be saying plowing. I mean, you're gonna, obviously, weather conditions are gonna be affecting what you use.
Absolutely, and we would have to revisit our plan, because our plan, we've referred to this for a very long time, that this is our plan, this is everywhere. So we would have to adjust our plan as well. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So Craig DeGianrino, V-Trans, just given you're considering a bill that is looking to reduce chloride, and you're looking at V-Trans practices as maybe the go-to, I would just say, and you can confirm this, Ernie, that our practices are really intended for roadways, not parking lots, not sidewalks. They are not pedestrian-based practices. So I would suggest as you move forward with the bill that you look broader, like New Hampshire, and you had some testimony from the snow program there. There's even have in the Adirondacks, you heard from this today as well. I think there's a lot of other expertise out there for that commercial-based industry, in which we don't have.
Well, this gets at the question that I was sort of holding off on, which is one of the things that we had discussed as a possibility is whether or not we needed a third-party contractor. Because the bill envisions, setting aside some money to go towards paying some contractor to put on this training. And we thought, well, AOT has this expertise. They're doing best management practices, like could they just do it? Would it be cheaper if you all ran the training yourselves? Is that realistic? And so what I'm hearing is a partial answer to that question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But it sounds like it's certainly not the parking lot, sidewalks, pedestrian aspects. But I'm interested, yeah, in your thoughts on that.
Sure, I'm happy to offer just a brief snippet here, but, I think we heard yesterday that the majority of the chloride issue is not road rates. Yeah. It's the forest state, parking lots, commercial application. We're not the experts in that. So I would suggest third party would be the way to go. We do have a small training program with multiple roads. They have limited funding, limited staff. You may spend more money ramping up that program than you would tapping into programs that are already out there. Whether it be Canada, that is the using or a local college.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, I think that is helpful. I would also. It seems to me that based on what I've heard and what I think we heard from other witnesses is doing like a combination. That there may be a role for you all to play, but I totally hear you that you're doing parking lots and driveways and sidewalks, et cetera. But relying just completely on a third party vendor that's literally in another country. I heard from witnesses that an important part of the training is also like in person.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in the truck or in the parking lot training, and we can get that through online training. So it feels to me like we might need to do kind of a combination of things, because learning how to calibrate like a higher technical machine that's enormous, doing a webinar is gonna help you do that.
Yeah, so let's, oh, yes, go ahead.
So you guys have shut all the high-tech stuff, tied into GPS. Evidently, so is there anything, do you know if there's anything available commercially for landscapers and parking lot flowers?
I would say Ernie Patno, Director of Maintenance, I would say for all of the technology we have in our vehicles, it is commercially, we buy it commercially available. It's none of it is specifically tailored to V-Trans. These are products that are offered through when we attend salt symposiums, Clear Roads. You know, we're part of two United States national organization, Clear Roads and ASHO, that keep us on the cutting edge. But this stuff is all you can just purchase it.
Okay, thanks. So I'm thinking maybe we gotta look for some commercial applications for 1-ton trucks. See what's available industrial.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Jen? Okay, super. And welcome up, Joel, or okay.
We're gonna say Joe.
Okay, very good.
I'm good.
Okay.
I can speak right here.
For the record, my name is Joel Perigo. I am the Municipal Assistance Program Manager at V-Trans. And I want to be clear, municipal assistance in this case is more funding based, not necessarily technical assistance that we've been talking about. That's that in the local road section. So as far as I'm aware, V-Trans is the only, and so I'm here to testify on a portion of the bill that talks about grant funding for municipal salt sheds. And so as far as I'm aware, V-Trans is the only sort of entity in the state offering this sort of grant assistance at this point. And our funds are limited to a single program called Transportation Alternatives, which is a set aside of our formula funds. So we are required to take this set aside and spend it on one of seven eligible categories that fall under Transportation Alternatives. Prior to the Clean Water Bill, Transportation Alternatives was traditionally used for bike and pedestrian type projects, sidewalks, and that sort of thing like that. When the Clean Water Bill came into play, legislature directed us to spend, it varied for a few years, and I won't revisit it, but it's now in perpetuity. It says that we are required to spend half of the TA set aside on this environmental mitigation category, which is an eligible category under the Transportation Alternatives Program. And the eligibility says environmental mitigation to address water pollution due to highway runoff. You don't hear sand and salt sheds in there. We had a loose interpretation from our local federal division office at the time the Clean Water Bill was coming into play to say, yes, we can fund sand and salt sheds with this funding. At that time, the funding was limited to a $50,000 cap of federal funds, and the salts, the shed, we'll call it, had to be within 50 feet of a direct waterway. Since then, we've sort of loosened those restrictions. We're now capping our awards at $500,000 in federal funds. And there's no requirement to have it be within 50 feet of a waterway, but the municipality must demonstrate, water quality improvement with the project that they're completing. Notes here. V-Trans does not have, we do not have any data related to municipal needs as far as sand and salt sheds, what's required out there, or what's needed out there. We are simply based on the applications we receive in our annual solicitations, and we sort of react to that. What we do know is that based on the projects that we're funding, those average costs of a new structure is somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $700,000. Based obviously on the size of the municipality and the size of the shed that they need. The TA set aside prior to IIJA was 2.2 million. IIJA doubled that, or nearly doubled it. Our set aside is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.3 million, and so half of that is going into the environmental mitigation category. Also within that environmental mitigation category are other competitive projects like resiliency type projects, culvert upgrades, and traditional stormwater treatment practices. So there's a lot of competition for that small amount of money. Cover the statute requirements. I think it's pretty much all I have to offer. I didn't answer any questions.
So the grant funding that you have is not actually available for private salt sheds or storage areas.
Correct.
Right.
A municipality would have to be the sponsor.
And there would be, I assume, some kind of prohibition on using state money to do that.
So this is federal funding.
Yeah.
And right, so it's their TA also, transportation officers also lists the eligible applicants or recipients of the awards, and municipalities are one of them. RPCs fall under there, but no private.
And how are you finding the requests for help with specifically salt sheds over time? Like, is it sort of leveled off? Is it still, is it continuing linearly? You know what I mean? Like demand.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's I would say probably I'd have to look into it, but I'd say pretty generally.
Okay.
To be honest, we get every round of, and we put this out every year. We probably get 5 to 6 applications statewide each year for sand and salt sheds. And I'll be quite honest, in the water quality world, they don't rise to that. It is the stormwater treatment projects that we're wanting to fund, and these large culvert upgrades and those sorts of things, rather than sand and salt sheds.
So they if you get 5 or 6 applications a year, does that mean you're not, I assume that means you're not funding all of those. Do you have a sense of like how many you're funding?
One or two.
1 or 2.
A year.
And some portion of what they're asked for.
Yeah, so there's a $500,000 federal fund cap.
Yeah.
Which equates, and there's a 20% local match on top of that. So. I mean, we had some projects successfully build salt sheds under that. We've had a lot that have failed and didn't move forward because the cost got too much. The other part of it, I actually meant to mention this, is that because the eligibility is the environmental mitigation sort of piece of this, we've also sort of deemed enhancements to these salt sheds as ineligible. Like, a town doesn't want to just build a basic salt shed, they want to have equipment storage and potentially offices and heat and electric, and this, it's not eligible for this funding, so then they're like piecemealing these things together. And so we've had a lot of municipalities come to us, we've even awarded the funding, and then they back away from it just because they couldn't come up with the additional funding.
Great. Any other questions at this point? Okay, well, thank you so much. Yeah.
I have an offer for you folks, or Continental Director of Maintenance, if you'd ever like to see one of these trucks or one of our facilities.
Feel free.
Just reach out to Secretary Quinn and he'll probably get it made.
Okay.
And
Take a morning, we can take over.
and
Mark might be a good one.
the,
Let's ride it around there.
huh? In the parking lot, we would consider letting you move.
That would be great, right?
So we do not have a liquid salt making facility here in Montpelier, so you'd have to be outside of this area to find one of those, but the trucks are everywhere, obviously they're all the same. So anytime you'd like to see a facility or how these trucks operate, or even a plow truck ride, we've facilitated many of those for our Senate and House member records, so.
Since we're talking about salt sheds, it's just, I think this might be a question for Jennifer. I'm wondering if there's any rules in the TMDL that, I know that a TMDL is like targets, I think it's not.
Right,
that.
it's not the implementation plan.
It's not the implementation plan, so maybe this is really about the implementation plan, but thinking about storage sheds, are there restrictions on salt storage in an impaired waterway?
To my knowledge, at this point, no.
Okay,
I think, like you said, and haven't gotten a chance to see what Tim said yesterday, but, my guess is they might have talked about how the TMDLs, like you said, are just they're a budget.
right,
And it's the implementation plan that really sets out what needs to be done to reach that. And as so far, we don't have, the state has not developed an implementation plan to my knowledge
for that,
for the chloride TMDL.
do you think, I mean, if. And that would be A&R that would come up with that implementation plan,
Yes.
and if. I assume that, well, I guess this is really a question maybe for A&R, but I'm wondering if they need any authority to be able to prohibit salt storage as in impaired waters.
That would be a question for them. I would think, under the Clean Water Act, they probably have some authorities, but or maybe Jared. You look like you might be looking to say something. I would want to answer.
No, that's okay, it's just occurring to me now, like,
Yeah,
this is sort of a small part of this bill, but particularly for places that are impaired, that could be important. Where are these allowable uses? So something I just wanna make a note of, I'm gonna pin that thought, maybe come back to it. Another question, go ahead.
Along those lines, if there are any restrictions on where AOT can put salt sheds in relation to watersheds or wetlands.
other than, any typical, there's wetland permitting, there's stormwater permitting, all those things that have requirements laid out. I don't think there's anything additional. Yeah, not to my knowledge. I haven't,
So you
Our-
would
our
have to go
facilities
back to
group-
50 or anything like that.
we probably,
We have,
Depends all facilities.
yeah. Well, I mean, we have to get all the permits that anybody else would have to.
And
Yeah,
I imagine that all of the state's salt sheds are covered.
All, but, well, the bill talks about salt and sand, right?
Yes.
So one of the clarifying questions that we have is that sand charged with salt, or is it sand that's not charged with salt? So that comment's been shared with Jared, I believe, shared our comments with the committee. We have done an inventory of our sand and salt piles, and all but 9 at this point are covered. And some of those are sand, strictly sand, some of them are salt. That's the information I've gotten from the having actually reached out to this.
we'll clarify, but 99.9% positive we have no salt that's not covered.
So maybe that's all sand, it's the charged sand.
It would be charged, saying 5%.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, but I will get back to you with factual.
That would be great, and I imagine that the limitations to covering, if there is anything remaining, is a financial question, like how much would it cost to, to get that covered, and that that would be good information to know as well.
Yep.
So that we can do our best to support you in that. Another question, yes, go ahead.
Well, it sounds like you had comments on the bill, like specific requests for changes or modifications. And could you send them to the committee? And not to Jared, Jared's
I
not.
have to send them to the committee once I get the authorization to do so from my leadership, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, that would be great if you
yeah,
have,
if you have
comments.
suggestions or
yes.
things that would work better from your perspective, that would be helpful to
Absolutely,
hear.
and send them
Great.
through. Your.
Jude, yeah,
Jude, yeah.
wonderful, thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. Any other questions at this point? Okay, super, thank you so much. Okay, no worries. Okay, so we are 5 minutes out. Oh, I guess we do have Laura with us virtually. The stormwater, our manager of stormwater from South Burlington. So just anticipating that maybe we could just go right into Marissa's presentation if she's ready, and then we'll take our planned break at 10:30. Marissa, are you ready to go? Sorry, we're a little bit early here, so I don't want to put you on the spot if you need a little more time.
No, I'm ready to go whenever you all are. So.
Super, well, thank you for being here. Did you hear our round of introductions at the beginning? If not,
Yeah.
okay.
I did not, unfortunately.
So we'll do a quick round of introductions here and then we'll let you take it away.
Perfect.
Hi Marissa, I'm Ruth Hardy, Senator from the Addison District.
And I'm Terry Williams, Senator from Rutland District.
And Watson from the Washington District.
Hey, Marissa, step back, Caledonia.
Julie, committee assistant. And Seth Bongartz from Bennington had to had another meeting, so he'll be away, I think, for this for your whole presentation, unfortunately, but we'll hopefully catch him up. So we'll let you introduce yourself and then tell us about your thoughts on this and how it's going in South Burlington.
Sounds great. Thank you. So I'm Marisa Rorba. I'm actually the Stormwater Superintendent for the City of South Burlington. I work within the Department of Public Works. And I do have a presentation, so hopefully we'll be able to share. Do screen one. Can you all see that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There was a little bit of delay yesterday, it might.
It may yet
Yeah.
work.
I didn't see, usually when they're gonna share, thumbs up here.
Oh, really?
So
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Great.
All right, perfect. Okay, thank you all for inviting us to come and speak about chloride in South Burlington. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing and comment on how it's going. If we'll actually advance. There we go. All right. Just a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to talk a little bit about our chloride impairments in South Burlington, how we at Public Works are managing our chloride application, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about challenges and considerations that we are seeing. So we have 4 chloride impaired waterways in South Burlington. Potash Brook, Bartlett Brook, Centennial Brook, and Englesby Brook. Potash Brook is our largest watershed within South Burlington and is predominantly in South Burlington. So that is a huge focus for us. It is also our most developed watershed. All 4 of these brooks have been identified as high priority for TMDL development. And as we all know, the state has started developing chloride TMDLs, and we are anticipating that these will be coming down the line here soon. We also have our own MS4 permit here in South Burlington. And so as part of that MS4 permit, we have to develop a stormwater management plan. And because we have these 4 chloride impaired waters, we have to address reduction of our salt use as part of our MS4 permit. So in addition to the impacts that we're seeing on stream health, we're also seeing a lot of impacts on our infrastructure. We have a lot of corrugated metal culverts which corrode with the use of salt. We are seeing a lot of sinkholes forming and having to replace this infrastructure sooner than anticipated because of the chloride impairment. So this was also a driver in our efforts to address our salt use. And then I did just mention stream health, but we have been monitoring the specific conductivity in Potash Brook specifically since, I believe, 2022. We were aware that chloride impairment was going to be a problem. I think the Potash Brook was put on the 303D list in 2022. And we wanted to get ahead of that and see for ourselves how bad that impairment actually was. And so we've been continuously monitoring since then. You can see on this graph here, specific conductivity is the pink line, so near the top there. And the concentrations are on the right vertical axis. If you see the graphic above it, you can see that when you hit 500 microsiemens per centimeter, you start seeing a real impact on aquatic life. And we have seen, I want to point out that the vertical axis in this graph is specific conductivity. And you have to multiply that by 10 to get the actual concentration. So we're actually seeing over 1,000 microsiemens per centimeter in Potash Brook regularly. So we know that it's a problem. And if you aren't familiar with South Burlington and where Potash Brook is, Potash Brook watershed includes the malls on Dorset Street, so Blue Mall, U Mall, Market Street, a fair amount of the airport. It's a very densely developed area.
Marissa, can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
We go back to that graph. I guess I'm not familiar with that unit, the micro S. What is that unit?
Siemens, SIEMANS. It's a measure of the specific conductivity, and specific conductivity can be directly related to chloride concentration. So that's how we measure for chloride in the stream.
Do you have a sense of, because we've been talking about the concentration mostly in like micrograms per liter. So I assume that because there's this correlation between the conductivity and the amount and like the concentration. Maybe this is something I can ask you later, but I'd be interested in the like the conversion of that, just because, you know, to make sure that we're not, because I want to be able to compare it like apples to apples. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I don't have the conversion off the top of my head, but I can.
Okay, that's all right. No, I can email you about that later. Thank you. Sorry, please carry on.
All right, so that is the problem that we are looking at in South Burlington, some of the drivers behind what we are doing. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we are doing to manage our chloride application. So we have a snow management plan in South Burlington, and this slide basically lays out the steps that we are taking to decrease the amount of salt we are applying to traveled surfaces. We pre-treat the salt pile prior to loading it in the trucks. So we pre-treat that with our salts. The granular salt product is sodium chloride, which we pre-treat with magnesium chloride, a liquid, in our salt shed here at DPW prior to loading it in the trucks. So I believe the V-Trans said that they were applying wet salt to roads. That's essentially what we are doing as well. Our Deputy Director of Operations here, Adam, keeps a very close eye on weather forecast, and he makes the call to deploy as soon as possible after the start of a storm to prevent buildup, to prevent having to melt down that layer of compressed snow. And then we put a huge emphasis on mechanically removing snow prior to salting. So we have on our larger plow trucks, we have two different blades for the most part, an articulating live edge plow blade and then a salt saver blade, which I have a picture of on my next slide. We also have a very low goal application rate. We have a goal application rate of 150 pounds per mile, per lane mile. Adam is the one who sets this, and we do track this as well. We have tracking software that for our full-size plow trucks will track the application rate for each truck. We also calibrate our salt spreaders. We do that currently about once a year. So that is something that we have been discussing increasing, but there are some other factors playing into that. Some of this will be changing in the next year or so. We also do extensive staff training. We currently do that staff training in-house. A little bit more about our equipment and materials. We have 11 full-size plow trucks. We also have 2 one-ton pickup trucks that we plow our shared use paths with, and then 4 sidewalk plows. Currently, we do not have a system to track the salt application for the one-ton pickups and the sidewalk plows. That is something that we are hoping to incorporate in the future. Again, I spoke about the salt saver plow blades. So in this picture, if you see the smaller black blade behind the big plow blade, that is going to be your salt saver blade. So it's essentially a secondary blade that scrapes down more. And we use granular sodium chloride and a liquid magnesium chloride. And the reason we include the magnesium chloride is that the mag chloride has the effect of lowering the effective temperature that the salt can be used at. So we are using less salt at less chloride products at colder temperatures. That's the idea. And again, I mentioned that we use a tracking software as well. One of the benefits of the tracking software is that we get to see by truck, and each truck has its assigned driver from our crew, what the application rates are. So this is the data from last year. You can see the truck numbers on the bottom there, and the gray bar is our goal rate. So
The gray,
we have not, sorry.
the gray is your goal.
Yep, gray is the goal. Orange is the average for the entire fleet. And then blue is the pounds per mile for each truck. One of the things that we do with this data is we actually have our engineering tech print this data out and post it on a bulletin board downstairs where the crew can see it. So which has actually been a really effective tool. We create a little bit of friendly competition within our crew. And so everybody can see what the application rates of everybody else is.
How is these, sorry, maybe you have this, but how have these lines trended over time? Are you getting closer to your goal amount, or is it, or how long have you been tracking it in this way?
Yeah, so we have been, that's actually brings me perfectly to the next slide.
Great.
We've been tracking it for 10 years. So this graph here shows our average pounds per salt used per lane mile on the blue line. And then since we do also load the liquid mag onto our trucks, our liquid use as well over time. And you can see that it is in fact trending down. So it has actually been effective to be tracking it, using the data and posting it for our crew to see.
There's another question in the room, go ahead.
This is great to see. Are you also tracking, just to head off any concerns about safety? Are you also tracking like crashes or fender benders or anything about safety, just to see if there's an impact there?
We are not specifically tracking that data. Anecdotally, we haven't seen any. We haven't heard from residents, at least.
Oh,
That
well,
they
that's a good
feel-
sign, 'cause people are, you know, vocal when they don't like something.
Yes.
Yeah.
There has been some commentary on, say, the shared use paths not being plowed early enough. But as far as actual road safety, we haven't had a lot of feedback from residents saying that the decreased amount of salt has significantly increased their risk in driving. So,
I guess I also just want to, sorry, since we're here, I just want to appreciate this as a metric. Because I think sometimes we've talked a lot about, does this kind of work end up saving money or, saving amount of salt? But every winter is different and hard to compare. But I imagine that if you were just tracking your average salt use per lane mile or gallons of liquid per lane mile, that may be more, you may be able to see improvement better with that metric.
absolutely, and we do track the other cost metrics and amount of salt that we purchase per year and amount of liquid that we purchase per year, all of that as well, but we do find that this is the most representative metric for how it's actually working.
Super, thank you. Oh, there's one other question, yep.
The previous slide that showed the number of pounds of salt, is that in a year? The upper chart.
The upper chart, yes, this is for the 2023-2024 season.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, and so we do feel that this is working pretty well for us. We feel that we have been able to make an impact on reducing our salt use, and we feel that we are pretty proud of how it has worked so far. We do plan on some future investments though. Our lovely salt tracking software is at this point 15 years old, so we are currently in the process of upgrading it. We are going to be getting a new salt tracking software that is going to include a geofencing capability, which means we are going to be able to remotely set or automatically set salt application rate to trigger when the driver drives into our chloride impaired watersheds. And it also does have remote rate setting capabilities. So our Deputy Director of Operations, Adam, will be able to have more control over what is actually being applied when the trucks are out in the field. We do also have a fleet replacement strategy that at this point includes when we purchase a new plow truck, when we replace a full-size plow truck, that plow truck now automatically will include the purchase of a live edge plow and a salt saver plow. Things that we are also considering, especially after some of the storms that we have seen this winter, we are considering the use of a brine to pre-wet the road surfaces, just directly in advance of the storm. So I know that my counterparts from V-Trans were speaking about the use of brine as well, and brine makers. We do not have a brine maker here. However, the city of Winooski just purchased one, and we are currently talking with them about essentially purchasing brine from them and experimenting with it and seeing if we feel it makes a difference here on our roads. As far as material storage goes, we are fortunate enough here to be outside of a chloride impaired watershed where we are at Public Works, and at our Public Works facility, we have all of our materials stored on site. So we do have a salt shed right out there. And that salt shed is going to be replaced at the end of its useful life. It's within our capital improvement plan right now, I believe, for FY29. And so we are paying close attention to our material storage as well.
Can I ask you a question about that? Do you store any, it sounds like you have one storage shed for salt. I assume that storage shed is not in any of the watersheds for the impaired waters?
No, it is not. We are in direct drainage to the Winooski River here at our facility.
Thank you.
And I should also say that the surface underneath is fully paved as well, so the salt is contained fairly well here. Okay. Moving on to some challenges and considerations. We are very fortunate here in South Burlington to have a community that supports our endeavors here at Public Works and has been amenable to investing in this sort of equipment. We have had the financial resources to, over time, invest at this point about $63,000 in upgrading our equipment. And that number is about to go up again when we upgrade our tracking software. We are going to be spending, I believe, about $28,000 upfront to upgrade this tracking software, and then an additional $4,000 per year in a subscription for all of our trucks. So that is a significant financial investment that we were able to make a decision on in a relatively short amount of time because of the resources that we have here in South Burlington.
Thank you for that. We do have another question in the room.
Hey, Bruce, I just want to make sure, I mean, I know your slide says cumulative investment, but does this mean that you spent $63,000 over 13 years total?
Yes, which will be bumping up to about 90,000 here in a few
Okay.
months.
I mean, that just doesn't seem like very much for that whole period of time, but I'm glad you, the voters have approved it. If it was, yeah, so yeah, that's good, I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see that it bumped up pretty significantly over the last 3 years there when we really invested in more of our plow equipment for the mechanical removal. But again, we have a fairly large fleet here, and we didn't choose to invest in a brine maker, and we have been using the same tracking software for 15 years and are just now upgrading it. So we have been making some strategic choices about what is upgraded when, because ultimately this equipment does get pretty pricey as you get into the more advanced technologies. And I guess my main point here is that we are very lucky here at South Burlington. But I would say that we are not representative of the majority of municipalities in the state as far as what we are able to do and how quickly we are able to turn around investments in our equipment.
Yeah, fair enough.
And of course, we have to worry about public safety. That is here at Public Works, that is the main concern in implementing our snow and ice management. My main concern as the stormwater superintendent has to also include our fluoride impaired waterways and meeting the requirements of our MS4 permit. But ultimately, why we do what we do is to keep our public safe when they are driving. We do not make any sort of promises about clear and completely bare travel surfaces, and we do, our crew uses some judgment on how much salt they are applying based on terrain and location. But one of the biggest things that we want to be careful about in trying to further decrease the amount of chloride we are using would be to not impact our public safety. Because again, we already have a very low goal for application rate, and we already, excuse me, pay a lot of attention to mechanically removing snow and ice before salting and really doing the best that we can to minimize that amount. And there is some concern here with the idea that we would be required to further reduce our application, and would just like to, as I'm sure you all know, like to be cognizant of public safety issues.
Thank you. We do have another question in the room here.
Thanks, Marissa. I know, one of the smaller municipalities in my district. They have a place where contractors can, when they have to remove snow on a heavy snow year. A lot of that has salt and gravel in it. Do you guys offer, do you have a special place where that, where you allow that to happen?
Where we allow contractors to obtain salts, is that, was that the question?
Where they can actually, when we get a lot of snow and the snow banks get built up and they have to remove them from parking lots.
Hmm.
Where do they dump that snow when they actually have to remove it? Do you have a place in South Burlington designated for that?
We don't have a specific place for that snow to go. I believe at the U Mall, they actually just pile it up on site because they have so much space. As far as other properties, I'm not sure where they dispose of their snow materials.
A lot of salt ends up
A
there.
lot of salt ends up there,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know a lot of towns, they put it right next to the river, because when it melts, it's gonna
Goes to
go.
the river.
Right, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to my last slide. So we feel that we here at the city are doing everything that we can to reduce our chloride use. And I know that I heard earlier that you all heard testimony the other day that identified private properties as a major contributor to the chloride impairment problem. And I do just want to reiterate that. We see a lot of salt use, like what you can see on the screen here. This is actually taken in South Burlington. And we feel that it is very difficult for us to meet any sort of requirement, although the TMDLs have not been implemented yet, without the participation of the private landowners, and are concerned that there is not well, there definitely isn't currently, but that there needs to be serious thought put into how to incentivize these large property owners who hire contractors or just have somebody go out and salt like this, to actually decrease their salt use. Currently, there's not really a financial incentive. I believe that we're paying $88 a ton for salt this winter, which is basically nothing. And they have a huge liability, which I know that Bill S-29 does speak to that some, but I did also just want to highlight that as well, that we as the municipality are not, feel that we're not going to be able to effectively decrease that chloride concentration in our streams without buy-in from the private landowners.
Yeah, there's another question. Yes, go ahead.
To that point, I see your little image, salt smart, scatter 3 inches between grains. How effective do you think that kind of public relations messaging is? Cause I don't think our bill includes anything like that, and maybe, even if we can get contractors to salt smarter, there are homeowners who are probably spreading too much salt, even just in their driveways.
Absolutely.
Have you found this to be effective, or do you have suggestions about that?
So this graphic is actually from, I think, the Lake Superior region.
Oh, okay.
We just liked it, but we in Chittenden County, the MS4s have a kind of cooperative group that comes together to meet a couple of the minimum control measures in our MS4 permits related to public outreach and education. And we do actually have a consultant that we've hired collectively to put out similar types of messaging, where we're actually have some social media campaigns going on. I believe it's also in some newspapers. We did have radio ads at one point. I'm not sure if we're doing that anymore. That does get to a similar idea, trying to target the private homeowners and educate them about what effective salt use actually should look like. I would say it has been marginally effective. I think that it could be ramped up more, and we actually here, specifically at South Burlington, my coworkers and I have been putting together a kind of more local campaign to address this. We're getting some mugs made with some cute graphics and some inserts that we are going to be handing out to our residents here, with the idea being that if, sorry, excuse me, one mug is enough to salt a 20-foot driveway, like one 12-ounce coffee cup. And so we'll see how that goes as far as public outreach, but it is something that we are actively working on, and it's hard to tell how effective it has been at this point.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
It's good to have that image though, that a mug is
Yeah.
enough for a 20-foot driveway.
Yeah.
Like that I
That's
feel like.
not what most people do.
Yeah, right, no, I
Wow.
not, but just having that as a reference point is useful, yeah, and something everyone can relate to, I think.
Yeah.
All right, and this is actually my last slide, so thank you.
Okay, could be a connection between like incentivize, you only use a mug, you get a free coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a consumer in the quantities that you typically buy at, this stuff's not inexpensive.
No.
Yes,
Yeah.
so true.
Not getting the same price as municipalities.
Yeah, fair enough. Any other questions for Marissa while we have her here? Great, thanks. Okay,
Thanks,
thank you so
Marissa.
much, that was
Thank you.
very helpful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we are a little bit early for our break, but I think that's great.